All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something pretty interesting, pretty specific. Have you ever wondered how those big companies, the ones with multiple divisions or related companies all under one umbrella, uh, how they streamline their sales when one part takes the order, but another one actually ships the product?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a pretty common scenario, right? Especially with large organizations, so many moving parts.
Absolutely. And today we're going to break down exactly how that works, specifically within SAP Cloud. They have this really neat process called, get this, Intercompany Sales Order Processing Domestic. Or if you're into the SAP lingo, it's the 1HO scope item.
1HO, catchy. So, what we're talking about is essentially a predefined way for different parts of the same company to work together seamlessly on a customer order, even when they're handling different aspects of it.
Exactly. And the sources you provided actually give us a really clear picture of this. We've got the general overview of what this 1HO thing is, step-by-step guides for different things you got to do in the system, configuration guides for setting this whole intercompany thing up, and even some troubleshooting notes because, hey, things can go wrong, right?
Right, right. And what I find interesting, looking at these sources is that they really highlight this push for automation and efficiency. I mean, the whole point here is to minimize manual work and make things smoother, which for a big company can translate to some serious time and cost savings.
Big time. So let's get into it. Imagine this. A customer places an order, right? Now, one part of the company, let's say the sales division, takes that order.
Yeah.
But the actual goods, the stuff the customer wants, is sitting in a warehouse managed by a different but related company. This is where the intercompany sales order comes in. It's like the signal flare that sets this whole internal collaboration in motion.
And from there, things move like clockwork. The affiliate company, the one with the goods, they become the key player. They handle everything, picking the stuff, packing it, and then doing what's called the goods issue. Basically, that's the system saying, yep, the goods have left the building. They're on their merry way to the customer.
Okay, but here's where things get even more interesting, at least for me, the billing part. It's not just a simple invoice anymore. The system actually generates two invoices. One is for the customer, your standard F2 invoice. But behind the scenes, the company that shipped the goods, they also send an invoice to the company that made the sale. This one's called an intercompany invoice, or IV invoice.
You got it. And this internal invoice isn't just some formality, it plays a key role in making sure everything is accounted for. The system actually keeps track of the proof of delivery. It's all about confirmation that the customer actually received what they ordered. And to top it off, that intercompany invoice, it automatically gets recorded in the sales company's accounts payable. It's all about minimizing manual intervention, reducing errors.
Pretty slick, right?
Yeah.
But how does the system actually know how to do all this? How does it know who's who within the company and how to handle all these different parts of the process automatically?
That is the magic of configuration. I mean, that's
Yeah.
where all the groundwork is laid. One of the crucial elements is how they set up something called the shipping data for plants. Basically, this involves telling the system, hey, this particular plant, this location within the shipping company, that's represented by this specific internal customer number.
So it's all about mapping out the internal structure within the system.
Precisely. Another vital piece is how they connect the sales organizations to the different parts of the company responsible for receiving the goods, what they call receiving company codes. It's assigning specific sales teams to specific receiving points within the company. And what's really cool is that this allows them to have different accounting rules for each setup.
So different teams can have their own way of handling the accounting, even if they're within the same company. That's where account determination groups come in, right?
You got it. It's all about flexibility within a structured framework. And let's not forget about taxes. Even for domestic sales, you need to get the tax part right. So the configuration includes assigning tax codes based on the regions involved. Plus, they got to define which sales teams and distribution methods are connected to which plants, which shipping locations. It's all about mapping out the internal supply chain in a really granular way.
It's interesting how they've thought of all these little details. It seems like they try to automate as much as possible.
Oh, absolutely. And that attention to detail extends to the financial configuration for the internal billing, too.
Hmm.
There's a lot of depth there. You can set up default accounts payable settings for a receiving company, but you can also get more specific. You can create rules based on those account determination groups we talked about earlier, so you have even more control over how the internal invoices are handled, making sure the right type of invoice is generated, and the taxes are calculated correctly.
Yeah, and even the GL accounts. Those are the basic categories they use to track all the money coming in and going out, right? Those also determined automatically.
Exactly. And the system uses a whole bunch of factors to figure out which GL account to use the receiving company, the account determination group, the type of product, what they call the valuation class. And even if there are any extra charges or discounts involved, it's amazing how they've considered so many scenarios.
But I guess that makes sense, right? The more detailed the system is, the less room there is for error.
Absolutely. And to really bring this to life, your sources actually give some examples of issues that can come up. Things like an error message that says EDI, partner profile does not exist. That usually means the system isn't properly set up for those two internal companies to communicate electronically.
Ah, so it's like they're trying to send a message, but the other side isn't set up to receive it.
Exactly. Or another common one is sales organization XXX is not defined. That just means someone forgot to put in some basic info about the sales team involved. And sometimes you might even see errors related to missing GL account assignments for those internal invoices.
Yeah.
It highlights how interconnected all these pieces are.
Yeah, one little thing missing can throw off the whole process.
It can. And to give you a better sense of how this all plays out in the real world, your sources also provide a step-by-step walkthrough of a typical domestic intercompany sale. It all starts with someone in the internal sales department creating the order. Then a shipping specialist jumps in, they manage getting those goods ready and shipped out. After that, a billing clerk handles creating both the invoice for the customer and that internal invoice we talked about. And finally, someone over in accounting can see all this happening. They can see that internal invoice pop up automatically in their accounts payable records.
It's like a well-choreographed dance. Everyone knows their part.
Absolutely. And it all comes together thanks to that detailed configuration and the power of automation within the SAP cloud system. So to sum it all up, this 1HO scope item, it's like a streamlined, pre-built solution for companies in the same country that need to handle sales, where one entity sells and another one delivers. By automating so many of these processes, it takes a huge load off the people involved and significantly reduces the chances of mistakes, especially when it comes to that internal billing and accounting.
So it's really a win-win. Less work for the employees and less risk for the company. Now, for our listeners out there, here's something to chew on. We've been talking about domestic intercompany sales, right? But what about when those related companies are in different countries? What kind of curveballs do you think that throws into the mix? Think about things like different tax laws, currencies, and all those regulations that can vary from country to country.
It's a great question, and honestly, that's where things can get really complex. You've got to account for so many additional factors. And it's interesting because the sources you provided, they actually mentioned something called Intercompany Sales Order Processing International, the 1MX scope item.
Ooh, another catchy acronym.
Right. If you found this whole domestic process intriguing, diving into how SAP Cloud handles these international scenarios, that could be a fascinating next step. It would be interesting to see what additional configurations, checks, and safeguards they've built in to tackle the complexities of doing business across borders.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Until then.